Well, hello and welcome to Mags and Tilson. Well, we did get the 50/50 acid wash done on my 1971 Sportster tank and cleaned all the rust out of it. And it did expose quite a few pinholes down here. I have about 3 or 4 pinholes in this area right here. And it exposed a few more pinholes in this area of the fuel tank. And it also exposed a larger pinhole right on top of the fuel tank in the back here. And we'll start with the bottom first. And what you have to do is first get the area nice and clean. So I took some 80 grit sandpaper and sanded in the area so I have clean bare steel right all around the pinholes here on both sides. So after I have nice clean bare steel exposed, I'm going to use this flux right here. And then I'm going to apply the flux all around the pinholes and then use silver solder with a little small torch here, and that's going to flow the solder right into these pinholes nice and deep for a nice sound repair. And I've done this before and it works really great. So let's get started with this and get this tank nice and leak free so we have a nice solid repair, so we can proceed to put a nice paint job on this fuel tank. Okay, let's get started with this job. We'll put some tinning flux all across the pinholes right here on both sides. So let's get a little brush. And at this point, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. It would really help me out a lot here on this channel and help you bring more content just like this. And apply a thin coat of flux right across the area. And we'll do that on both sides where we have the pinholes. Okay. Now with that done, I'll take the silver solder and we'll light up our torch. And we'll heat up the area a little bit. We'll get that flux to flow a little bit. And then get the silver solder. And I want that to flow too. And I'm going to spread it around a little bit. And I want that silver solder to flow straight into the pinholes. So I'm going to heat it up and keep it hot and just let it flow a little bit. And you got to move it around sometimes. And back off your torch so it doesn't get too thin and flow off your repair area. Just kind of move it around. Take your time with it. Yeah, gee, I should have been a dentist. So if any of my subscribers need any dental silver fillings, just let me know and I will give you half off. But only to my subscribers. And that's that. That's all you have to do. Now I have nice sealed holes right here, right over the pinholes right here, into a larger area. Because the pinholes were actually kind of tiny, but I flowed the silver solder into a larger area because you never know what's outside of the little pinholes. So I always go a little bit bigger and silver solder larger area right here, so I shouldn't have any more problems. So that's sealed pretty good, and same on this side. And I can file this down a little bit and just make it a little bit smoother. Same with this side, and that's that. Okay, now let's flip the tank over and we'll do the top. Okay, now again I have a large pinhole right back over here. I'm going to rough up the area a little bit. This is 80 grit sandpaper. Okay, that's nice and clean steel right there. And we'll apply a little flux to it, to around the area that I'm going to repair here. I got quite a large pinhole right here. And these old Sportster fuel tanks, that seems to be a spot on that well where they seem to leak when they get old and they get full of rust inside. And they tend to leak right here. This is the second tank I had like this that had quite a big pinhole right in this area. Okay. And we'll flow that flux into the hole a little bit. And start melting in our silver solder. Right over the top. Sometimes it's better to stand the tank up so the silver solder kind of flows down into the hole and not off the tank like it's doing right now. But when you take the heat off of it, you can move it around. Just got to play around with it a little bit. And we'll let it cool down a little bit, and then I'm going to file this down flat. Okay, at this juncture, I decided to stand the tank up and to let the silver cider kind of flow into that larger pinhole. So you just have to take your time with these pinholes and, you know, make sure that you have the right angle so the silver cider is going to flow inside that pinhole and begin to fill it and then to harden and to completely seal it. Okay, I knocked down the high spot of the silver cider repair with this angle grinder here to make it a little bit easier. But you got to be careful that you don't touch the gas tank itself, just the high spot of the silver cider. And then I backed off with that, and I finished it off with a coarse flat file, just to file in the edges and try to meet the contour of the fuel tank. Now, you want to leave a mound of that silver cider there. You don't want to contour it too flat, because you're going to probably go into the repair, and you don't want to do that. Now in this area, it's okay to have a little mound right there because the seat is going to come up to this area anyway, and you're not going to be able to even see it. So it's fine to leave a little mound of the silver cider there. Okay, what I'm going to do now is follow up with a little mouse sander. I have 80 grit on here, and we're going to go ahead and just try to finish it off a little bit. So there it is. I have to repair, kind of flatten out a little bit better than I had before with that little mouse right there with the 80 grit sandpaper. And I'm going to just blend in the edges a little bit further with my file. And I'm going to call that good. And that's the way it looks. And like I said, the seat is going to be up against this, and you're not going to be able to really see that too much anyway. So next I'm going to go ahead underneath the gas tank, and I'm going to blend in these repairs as well. I'll take the angle grinder to it, and I'll kind of smooth it out a little bit on both sides, and we'll call that good as well. Okay, after looking the tank over a little bit closer, I did notice another little pinhole right over in this area. So I'm going to put a little bit of silver solder right here. And that's all that one needs. I fixed this pinhole right here, and there were 3 pinholes right there, so those are repaired. I just flattened it down a little bit and, you know, just address it so it blends into the contour of the fuel tank a little bit better underneath here. But it's a nice solid repair. I found a little pinhole right there, right up on top, right there. And I'll dress that down a little bit so it's smoother. And I'll show you up on top of the gas tank the repair that I made over here. You can see that I blended it in to the contour of the fuel tank a little bit better. And once it's painted, and I fill in all those little scratches right there, and it's painted, it's going to blend in a lot better, and you're not going to really be able to see it, and you know, unless you're really looking for it. But it's a nice solid repair, and it fits the contour of the fuel tank pretty good. And I have a little ding right there in the fuel tank, right there. Now I could Bondo that. It's not that deep actually, or I can silver solder it and to take out the depth of that dent a little bit, so when I Bondo it, all I really need to do is give it a very light skim coat of Bondo, and it would blend in perfectly, so the Bondo won't be so deep if I fill it in with a little bit of silver solder here. Alright, as you can see that I have the repair finished on the top of the fuel tank. Okay, as you can see, I have the repair done on the rear of the fuel tank. I took the angle grinder to it, and I kind of roughed it in with that, and then used the hand file, a coarse hand file, and blended in the silver solder to the contour of the fuel tank right there. And then I followed up with 80 grit on a mouse sander, and then blended in a little bit further, and kind of blended in the edges of the contour of the fuel tank. So once I put a coat of primer on this and I paint it, this is going to blend in a whole lot better. Plus the seat's going to be up against that. You're not going to really be able to see it anyway. Now, as you can see, I have a little dent right here. And what I really can do, instead of putting a thick coat of Bondo over it, I could put some silver solder over this and kind of bring that dent out a little bit flatter, and then follow up with a very light skim coat of Bondo, and that would fill it in perfectly. because I don't like using Bondo for like deep dents. Just use it just as a skim coat, just to blend in the contours. So I think I'm gonna silver solder this dent and kind of bring it out a little bit further, and then follow up with the skim coat of Bondo, and you won't be able to even see that dent. It'll be a very solid repair. Okay, I prepped the surface with some 80 grit sandpaper on this kind of deep dent in the corner of the gas tank right there. So it's all cleaned up and it's all ready. So I'm going to silver solder that and kind of take the depth of that dent out. I'll put some flux on it. And we'll light up the torch and I'll try to fill this in a little bit. Heat up the flux a little bit and okay, I'll let that kind of cool off, and that silver solder really leveled out that dent quite a bit, so it's not so deep. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to file that and contour that in, and then follow up with a very light skim of Bondo, and you'll never see that repair at all. Plus you have a very solid repair because it's silver solder, and so the Bondo is not so thick. The Bondo will be very, very thin, a very thin skim coat, so that will be like a lifelong repair. I don't like putting Bondo in deep dents because I have a rule. I don't like using Bondo any more than about a 1/16 deep on any dent. I just use Bondo as just a very light skim coat, just to blend things in perfectly. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead off camera and go ahead and file that in nice and smooth and try to blend it in better to the contour of the fuel tank, and then follow up with the skim coat of Bondo and start to prime this gas tank in. But first we're going to test it, of course, make sure we don't have any more leaks in this fuel tank, and then after that start to prime it and start doing a beautiful paint job on this old gas tank here. So let me get started and I'll start filing this thing down nice and smooth. Okay, so I filled in the dent I had in the gas tank with that silver solder, and then took some files to it and flattened it out a little bit, and evened out the contour going around it, and blended it in a little bit. So next it just needs a skim coat of Bondo to really blend it in better, and that would be it. Then it'll be ready for priming and painting. I found another leak. Well, let's go back at it. Let's go find that little pinhole and repair that one. Okay, I found two more little pinholes. I don't know if you can see them or not. Let's see. Right there where it's starting to get wet. And there's another one. Right over from that one. So I'll go back and silver solder those and hope these are the last two. And let's go ahead and repair these, and we'll give it one more test and see what happens. But so far, all the areas that I did repair are holding extremely well. So I didn't see these two little pinholes over here, right in the seam of the gas tank, right in here and here. Okay, let's get to it. Okay, like always, I sanded down that two little pinholes there, so the metal is nice and clean, and I'm putting the acid flux right over the pinholes right here, and that's going to etch it, so the silver solder has something to stick to. And here I plan to do a little wider area. And to go a little beyond those two little pinholes, just to make sure that I completely seal this thing up the right way. And it's a step-by-step process as you're going through these old fuel tanks. Okay, I'm going to preheat the flux and let that flow, and then start adding some silver solder to it. I'm sorry, my arm's in the way here. You can't see me actually apply it. So once the silver solder is actually in the seam here, I'm going to take the torch and just begin to heat it up and let the silver solder flow into the holes, and also follow the seam of the fuel tank. So if you think it's a quick job when you're trying to fix these old fuel tanks, well, it's not. It's the process, and you have to be patient with it. And you know, these little pinholes, just all of a sudden they just pop up on you, and that's the reason why I do an acid wash on these to expose them. And you got to keep on testing it and going back if you find a new leak, and go back and fix that one, and just keep at it. You know, but these are long-lasting repairs, and they hold up extremely well. And what I like to do is to angle my fuel tank so as to let the solder flow either up or down. I mean, it doesn't flow up, it does flow down. So I like to put the tank at an angle where it's facing downward, just on a little angle. And then I'm able to use the torch, and once the solder is on, I'm able to heat the solder up with the torch and to make it flow downward for a nice looking bead that goes all the way across that seam of the gas tank. Okay, let's take the garden hose and we're going to fill up the tank again and test for any more leaks and test my repairs as well. Well, before it was leaking right under this seam here, and I put some silver solder across that seam to fix a couple of pinholes, and so far so good. It seems to be holding pretty good. Well, time will tell, and if it stays dry like this, we're in good shape. Then we have all the pinholes fixed, and we'll move on to the Bondo work, and then on to the prime and the paint. But before, it was leaking like a sieve right under the seam right here. Well, let's see what happens. Okay, just when I thought I was finished and I filled up my gas tank and I didn't see any leaks until I turned it over. I seen one little pinhole leak right here, so I'll have to go after this one next, and hopefully that's the last pinhole leak on this fuel tank. So let's get after it. Again, we'll put some flux over the pinhole leak and the surrounding area. I think my torch is a little bit low on butane. That should do it. Now, I didn't want to cut anything out here because I want you guys to see how it actually is in real life, and when you're starting to address all these little pinholes. And if you want to save an old, put a 55-year-old fuel tank like this, you're going to have to go through the process sometimes, unless you have a really good tank. But I didn't want to cut anything out so you can see the whole process. And it takes a little while, and you have to be patient with it. Now, most of these repairs are underneath the fuel tank, and you're not going to be able to see them after it's all finished. And when I paint the fuel tank and it's sitting on the motorcycle. But it's worth doing. It's worth saving an old original Harley fuel tank, unless you have another choice, it's to buy an aftermarket one. And that's what I did not want to do. I wanted to put all the original parts back on this bike. And if this is what I have to do it, and then that's okay with me. And I don't mind doing this. I've done this many times. And these repairs really hold up well because I've taken my bikes all over the place, and they've never leaked after I've done this type of repair before. And if I didn't know these type of repairs wouldn't last a long time, and they were not sound repairs, I wouldn't steer you guys wrong and to make this kind of video and to show you the process. But like I told you, I've ridden these bikes all over the place after I made these kind of repairs to my fuel tanks, and they've held up extremely well, and I have years and years on these fuel tanks. And even if you buy a brand new fuel tank, these aftermarket ones, I've heard a lot of people talk about them, and you still have to fix the seams, and they leak, and you have to test them, and you have to do the body work on them as well. It's not like you pull them right out of the box and you don't give it a test, because many times the seams do leak on these aftermarket fuel tanks, and you got to go through this process. So I may as well just fix the old tank, and this way I know I have the old original Harley Davidson product. And all I'm doing now, I'm starting to flow all the silver into the seams. Just like that. I'll show you what I have. So that area should be fixed. And I had a pinhole right where that black mark, right where it points to, right on the seam over here. And I like to go a little bit more than just the area of the pinhole leak. I like to go on both sides of it, about a ½ inch away, and to make sure that I have everything. So that's it. Now I'm going to fill it back up again, let it sit for about a ½ an hour, and hopefully we don't have any more of these little tiny pinhole leaks. But I got the rest of it. It seems to be nice and solid now, without any leaks at all coming from this side. So hopefully we fix this one as well. I'm pretty sure I did. So let's refill the fuel tank and let it sit and see what happens. Okay, all the leaks are fixed now, so I emptied the tank, and to displace all the water and all the moisture, I'm gonna put some lacquer thinner into the tank, just a little bit, not too much, and I'm gonna swish that around, and that's gonna dry up everything in the tank and take all the moisture out of the fuel tank. So let me put the gas cap on it, and we're just going to swish it around a little bit. And get that lacquer thinner going throughout the fuel tank to clean all the walls. And that's going to dry everything up in there. Just like so. Okay, now I'll just dump it out. Okay, at this point of this video, I'd like to ask you to tune in next week for part 2, where I'll be applying the thin skim coat of Bondo, and you're really straightening out this fuel tank nice and straight. So tune in next week and we'll go through the Bondo application process. Okay, next I'm going to put some WD-40 down the gas tank, just enough to coat the walls so they don't rust. I'm not going to put too much in there, just a little bit. And again, we're just going to swish it around in the fuel tank just to coat the walls. Just going to swish it around in there a little bit. And as you've seen me just put a tiny amount of WD-40 in there, just enough to coat all the walls on the inside of the fuel tank, because we're going to be priming this fuel tank and we'll be painting it as well. So we can't afford to have any WD-40 spilling out all over the place. So it's just a very light coating in there. So we don't want any excess to drip out and to ruin our primer or to ruin our paint job. Should do it. Okay, it's getting kind of late, so I'm going to wrap this up, and I'll get up in the morning tomorrow and start the Bondo work, start to smooth out some of the little flaws that I feel on the side of the gas tank, and we'll fix all of that and make this gas tank perfectly flat and nice and straight and dent free. So tune in next week for part 2, and we'll begin the Bondo application process. Thank you for watching Max and Tillison. Take care of yourselves and happy motorcycling.